I think I just made a cohesive FNAF timeline using just the Steel Wool games. Welcome back to another FNAF theory, and in just a couple of months, FNAF is turning 10 years old, which is fantastic if you're a FNAF fan, unless you're trying to keep track of every single little detail that is out there. You see, combing through a decade's worth of content in order to find the most minute detail that not even most veteran FNAF fans would know about is absolutely insane. Here, let me give you an example of what that would look like. I made a list of everything that I could think of for somebody who wants to join the FNAF community right now, and they would want an entire understanding of the FNAF lore. There are 21 games in total, 10 of which are main series, 7 of which are spin-offs, and 4 of which are troll games. There are 50 books in total, 3 of them are novels, 21 are anthology books, 8 are graphic novels, 2 are interactive books, 5 are guidebooks, 3 are coloring books, and 8 are random books, including the cookbook, which I've heard is apparently lore relevant. There's also the movie, and you would have to catch up on all the Scott Games teasers that have been deleted off of his website for years. Now that is a ton of media to cover. But what if you didn't have to study all that to get a full understanding of the FNAF lore? You see, Help Wanted 1 is sort of a soft reboot for the franchise, which made me wonder if we could build a timeline using just Steel Wool's games. A huge reason I wanted to make this video in the first place is because FNAF AR got shut down. With things like FNAF AR and Scott Games' website deleting huge lore bits, it makes the monumental task of trying to decipher the FNAF lore nearly impossible because you can't get the information anymore. Now, RyeToast has a video on his channel with a pretty similar premise, I'll be honest, but you should definitely go check it out after this video because it's really good. In his video, he challenges himself to make a timeline using all the games in the series. No books, no Scott Games website, and no movie. Mainly because the movie wasn't out at the time, but still. But I want to take that idea one step further. Can we make a timeline using only Help Wanted 1, Security Breach, and Help Wanted 2? Now, I am cheating in this video just a little bit by referencing the animatronics by their names, even the ones that aren't given in the Steel Wool games. Why? Well, things are going to get really confusing really quickly if I have to reference a Freddy and then I have to describe which Freddy I'm talking about when there's 17 different Freddys. And since I'm already stealing his video idea, I might as well steal his podcast intro. Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the sense to do away with the whole notion, I give you the Steel Wool timeline. Now, you might be saying something along the lines of, timeline? This isn't a timeline. This is a mess here. And you're absolutely right. There is a lot happening on this board, but I promise you, we'll clean it up as we go. We just need to discuss the stuff that's on here first. Let's start with what we see on the bottom first. Down here is all the evidence that I can find in the first 4 games in the series. I'm going to be going through all of this and figuring out what Steel Wool decided to keep from the first 4 games. To make things a little bit easier on us, I've also divided all the evidence into 3 different categories, and our first category is going to be called During the Night. Now, this is all the evidence that we can normally find while playing the night portion of each game. Now, this is the largest portion of our evidence, but that's because it's a lot of things that Phone Guy tells us. Our second category is going to be called Minigames. Now, this is going to be all the information that we receive from the minigames we play from FNAF 2 to FNAF 4. This is going to include things like Happiest Day, Foxy Go Go Go, and any of the Crying Child minigames of FNAF 4. Now, our final category is going to be called Before and After the Nights, and this is going to be all the information that we normally receive from the newspaper clippings that we see at the beginning and end of each game, as well as the pink slips and checks that we receive when beating the games. Now let's move up the board real quick and take a quick look at our timeline for a second. For those with a keen eye, you might notice something right here. It's a gap that just says something happens, and this serves 2 purposes. The first function of this gap is that it divides this timeline into 2 easier to digest sections. This larger section are the actual events happening in the Steel Wool games, so starting right before Help Wanted starts and going all the way to the end of Ruin. That means that this smaller section right here are the events being retold in the Steel Wool games, starting off with FNAF 1 and going all the way to Sister Location. Not in that order, obviously. The second reason for this gap is that if we're only using information that we get from the Steel Wool games, we don't have enough information to fill this gap. We do know that something has to happen here because there are enough new animatronics that just show up and enough design choices between animatronics like Circus Baby to Scrap Baby. We just don't know what these events are. Whew. Now that we went through all the pieces that are on the board, let's start actually going through the timeline and crossing pieces of evidence off that we don't find in the Steel Wool games along the way. The very first thing that we put on this timeline is Fredbear's Singing Show, and we know for a fact that this exists, and it's the first thing on the timeline because of the ticket that we find in Security Breach. Now, like Game Theory seems to say in some of their videos, Fredbear's Singing Show is most likely some sort of traveling circus type of thing with an actual bear and no animatronics at this point. Now, the next big point in our timeline after Fredbear's Singing Show is Fredbear's Family Diner. And we know this happens pretty early in the timeline for two reasons. The first one are the posters that we find in Security Breach that have a 70s design to them. Now, obviously, looks can be a little deceiving, so the second reason is Phone Guy outright states that he needs to track down the original owners of Fredbear's Family Diner, which has to happen before FNAF 2. The next point in our timeline after the opening of Fredbear's Family Diner is Fall Fest of 1970. We get an exact date here, and we even can pinpoint the season of when it happens. I have this after Fredbear's Family Diner because I believe that the owners of Fredbear's Family Diner are using Fall Fest to advertise their new characters and their new state-of-the-art animatronics. The next big point in our timeline after Fall Fest is the establishment of Fazbear Entertainment. Hey, so I kind of misspoke in this part of the video. I originally say that this token right here from the Help Wanted games says that Fazbear Entertainment was established in 1983. It doesn't say that. It says that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been around since 1983. Now, I am going to make a little bit of a leap in logic here and say that Fazbear Entertainment was established in 1983, and that's just because that they're named after Freddy, not Fredbear or any other animatronic that we see. Hope that clears things up. After the establishment of Fazbear Entertainment, our next point in the timeline is Fall Fest of 83, which most likely burns down to the ground since we see that happen in Help Wanted 2. Now, some of you might be asking yourselves, well, where's the Crying Child's death on this timeline? Where's the Bite of 83? And that is an excellent question, because Steel Wool didn't make a reference to the Crying Child at all in their games. The Crying Child minigames from FNAF 4 aren't referenced at all. The Crying Child isn't a character in this timeline whatsoever. Now, because we don't have that crucial piece of evidence on this timeline, we're going from Fall Fest of 83 to the first Freddy's location opening. And not the one in FNAF 1, and not the one in FNAF 2 because that one's a prequel, but the one that's before FNAF 2 because Phone Guy references a third Freddy's location when he says the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Now remember, we're using information that we've only gotten from the Steel Wool games, and Steel Wool hasn't referenced the missing children's incident. Yeah, that thing that was said all the way back in FNAF 1 in the newspaper articles? Well, those newspapers don't exist. And you know what else doesn't exist? Any of the mini games that reference dead kids. So no Foxy Go Go Go, no Give Gifts Give Life, no Take Cake to the Children, no Save Them, no Follow Me, and no Happiest Day. Now, the closest thing that I can get to a reference to the missing children's incident in these games is the tombstones that we can find in Help Wanted 2 that have the dolls associated with them. But this is just a reference. There's not really any evidence saying what happened here. There's no reference that the kids died at a Freddy's location. There's no evidence that they even got stuffed into the animatronics or that they possessed the animatronics. They just have the dolls sitting next to the tombstones, which could just mean that these kids love the animatronics and these are their favorite ones. Now, you could argue that because we see the tombstones, the missing children's incident does in fact take place and it needs to be added to the timeline. But we get no confirmation of when this happens or even if it happens. We only got the date of 1985 from the books, and because this is a Steel Wool only timeline, we wouldn't have that detail. Not to mention, nobody mentions any kids going missing in or around a Freddy's establishment or getting killed for that matter. And that's pretty big. We're also missing an animatronic that's referenced by these tombstones. All the other ones are accounted for across the games except for one, Golden Freddy. I mean, sure, we get plenty of references to the guy. We collect a Golden Freddy Transformer in Help Wanted 2. There's Nightmare Fredbear, and we collect a golden plush of every other animatronic in Security Breach, but we still haven't seen our favorite Golden Boy. Anyway, we do know that a First Freddy's location does exist for the timeline, but we don't really have any significant events tied to it. So the next event that's gonna be on our timeline is the opening of the FNAF 2 location. Now, like I said earlier, we don't have any of the mini games in the Steel Wool games, which means that we can't add any of that to our timeline. But we can add all the things that Phone Guy says to us. Now, this means that we might be able to use everything that Phone Guy tells us in this timeline, including we're the second guard to work at this facility. There are no doors at this facility, but we are given a flashlight. It's the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The animatronics do walk around during the day here. Fredbear's Family Diner is a place. Someone uses one of the suits at the end of the week, and it happens to be yellow. There's an investigation around the FNAF 2 location. A day shift suddenly becomes available for us. The animatronics apparently think that we're an endoskeleton, and the FNAF 2 location closes at the end of the week. Now, we don't have an exact date as to where FNAF 2 can go on this timeline because we don't get the paychecks like we normally do in the original games, but we can safely say that it at least comes after the first location in the timeline because Phone Guy says that it's the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And it has to come before the FNAF 1 location because Phone Guy dies in that game. I also failed to mention that Phone Guy references the Bite of 87 in FNAF 1, and that's the reason why the animatronics can't walk around during the day. And in FNAF 2, he specifies that they do walk around during the day and doesn't say anything about the bite. So this has to be before the Bite of 87, which means that FNAF 1 comes after FNAF 2. We also learned that we're only the second night guard to work at this location, and because of the investigation that's taking place during the week that we're there, the place gets shut down by the end of the week. So this place is only open for what, 2 weeks? And we know that the place inevitably gets shut down due to one incident in particular. Someone using one of the suits in the back, specifically a yellow one. And remember how Phone Guy mentions the Bite of 87 in FNAF 1, but doesn't say anything about it in FNAF 2? That means that the Bite of 87 has to happen in between when we're playing FNAF 2 and when we're playing FNAF 1. This means that the bite has to happen in either the FNAF 2 building or in the FNAF 1 building. And considering Phone Guy says the Bite of 87 and doesn't say something like, oh, some kid got bit by one of the animatronics a few years ago, I don't think it happens in the FNAF 1 building, which means in our timeline, it still takes place in FNAF 2. Now, because we don't get to see the toy animatronics or the withered animatronics after this point, I think it's pretty safe to say that one of two options happens with both of the animatronics. Either they both get scrapped, or they both get used for spare parts in order to make the FNAF 1 animatronics. Or at least, most of them get reused for FNAF 1. You see, there's one animatronic from FNAF 2 that actually makes it to FNAF 1 without getting fully repaired, and another animatronic from FNAF 2 that makes it all the way to Circus Babies. And they're both Foxy. That would mean that after the FNAF 2 location closes, the next location to open would be Circus Babies Rentals. Now, on a normal timeline, this would be Circus Babies Pizzeria, but as far as I've found, Circus Babies Pizzeria isn't referenced in the Steel Wool games, so we would jump straight into Circus Babies Rentals. Now, because of the way that the minigames are set up in the Steel Wool games, we know that Sister Location is somehow tied to FNAF 4. So, I put FNAF 4 immediately after Circus Babies opening. That's because that almost half of the animatronics that we go against in the FNAF 4 minigames are Funtime animatronics. There's Circus Baby, Funtime Freddy, Bon Bon, and Bonette. You can also link the Nightmare BB and Plush Trap minigames the exact same way. You play both of these games in a house that's very similar to the FNAF 4 minigames, And if that's not enough evidence for you, there's a rare chance that you could find a mini Rena sitting in one of the doorways in these mini games. This means that besides Plush Trap and the Fun Times, all of the other animatronics that we see in these mini games are connected to FNAF 2, including Nightmare Fredbear. Now, I know I said earlier that Golden Freddy doesn't appear in these games, but I did say that he gets referenced quite a lot. And one of those references is in FNAF 2 when Phone Guy says someone uses a yellow suit. Now, hear me out on this because I swear this lines up. We get a reference in FNAF 2 to somebody using a yellow suit. We don't exactly get any information about what the suit was used for, but we do know that it was bad enough to close the location. We then have Circus Babies taking place after FNAF 2 in the timeline because whoever we're playing as in FNAF 4 is having nightmares of animatronics from both locations. There's Funtime Freddy, there's Circus Baby, there's Balloon Boy, there's the Puppet, and there's Golden Freddy. This most likely means that whoever we play as in the FNAF 4 minigames saw the Bite of 87 and is now having nightmares about it. That also explains why some of the animatronics are more nightmarish than others. The nightmare animatronics are scarier because this was a more traumatic point in this kid's life, and now this kid has an absolute fear of these animatronics. Now, some of you might be wondering why I think it absolutely has to be Golden Freddy who did the Bite of 87. I mean, we have Chica and we have Springtrap. Aren't they good candidates? And to that, I say that they don't check off all the boxes like Golden Freddy does. There's really only 3 boxes that we need to check off in order for Golden Freddy to be the culprit to the Bite of 87. 1. Why is Nightmare Fredbear one of the animatronics that we go against in the FNAF 4 minigames in Help Wanted? 2. It has to be a suit, not an animatronic, a suit. And 3, it has to be yellow. Now, since I've already discussed what point 1 is, we're going to move on to point 2 next. We only know of 2 Springlock suits in the franchise. There's Spring Bonnie, and then there's Fredbear / Golden Freddy. That immediately knocks Chica out of the running for the Bite of 87, but why don't I think that it's Spring Bonnie? Well, in the Steel Wool games, Spring Bonnie seems to constantly be shown in green, not yellow. Here is every Spring Bonnie and Spring Bonnie variant that I could find in the Steel Wool games. The only one that is for sure yellow is this poster of Spring Bonnie. Now, you could maybe argue that Glitch Trap over here is also yellow, but to me, he looks more green. But the vast majority of them are all green, including Plush Trap. And since Plush Trap is a toy that's supposed to be made before the events of FNAF 3, that most likely means that the original Spring Bonnie wasn't yellow, but he was green. So, sometime after the FNAF nightmares start, the FNAF 1 location opens up, which means our favorite Phone Guy starts working the night shift. Unlucky for Phone Guy though, because he's 1 week away from retirement and dies on the job. Lucky for us though, because he decided to start recording tapes for us so we can get settled in on our first few nights on the job. Now, Phone Guy does leave us something very important in these phone calls, but it's the one we hear after his death. Now, I'm gonna play you a quick clip of me playing the 5th night on stream, and I wanna see if you come to the same conclusion that I did.
Oh, hello. I didn't know you changed. Also, why is it in black and white? Chica, I think I hear her in there. What is happening? Huh?
Now, there are 3 important pieces of evidence that I took from this. 1.
The phone will ring and there will be nobody there.
2.
The lights will flicker on and off.
And 3. Everything is in black and white. That's not normally how these games are played. This is the only night that is in black and white. This led me to the conclusion that on this night, we're most likely playing as Phone Guy on his final night. Seeing something in black and white is a really common way that media likes to show that we're seeing something from the past. Not only that, Night 5 of FNAF 1 Help Wanted 1 is the hardest night that you can play, which would have been similar to Phone Guy's situation. The night he dies is the hardest night that he ever got to. The lights flickering and doors opening and closing on their own is just part of this weird purgatory that Phone Guy has fallen into because he died at the pizzeria. So we play our last night at FNAF 1 by playing Phone Guy's last night at FNAF 1, except we actually make it out. We redeem Phone Guy and actually make it to 6 a.m. Finally, after the end of FNAF 1, the next point in our timeline is the opening of Fazbear Frights. This is the point where we find out what Springlock suits are, because our boss finds tapes about them hiding in an old spare room at a closed Freddy's location. But that's not the only thing that he finds. No, he actually finds one of these Springlock suits. But this isn't just any Springlock suit. No. You see, the tapes tell us that Springlock suits are part suit and part animatronic. And they do this with a little thing called a Springlock, which pulls the animatronic components to the side so you can hop inside and wear it like a suit. And if you have any intelligence, you could probably see the fatal flaw in this design. If the Springlocks fail, then the animatronic components lock back into place where your body is. And we found a Springlock suit with a body inside. Now, due to the fact that we're not using any books for this timeline or any of the minigames from the original games, we really don't know who this character is. We don't get a name, we don't get any motivations. All we really know is that this guy had to be important because he keeps coming back in these games, and he was most likely the reason why the Springlock suits got retired, because he was most likely the person involved in the simultaneous Springlock failures. Now, shortly after first learning about this character, the whole building burns to the ground, with presumably us and Springtrap inside, since we're still playing the events of the game while the building is on fire. And after the FNAF 3 fire, that leads us into something. Like I said earlier, we don't really get a clear picture of what happens here because Steel Wool hasn't really told us. We know something has to happen here because in Help 1 and 2, they dropped new animatronics on us with Lefty and Pigpatch, and we know that some animatronics get redesigns from Baby to Scrap Baby, but we don't get the full picture of what happens here. And also, like I said earlier, this gap in the timeline is a great place to split it so you have two easier to digest pieces. So that's what we're going to do here today. I promise you, this wasn't planned to be a two-parter, but I'm on 4 hours of content right now that I need to edit and condense down into a video. I'm on minimal amount of sleep, and I'm already a week behind on this video. So it's gonna be one. So hey, don't forget to hit the like button to let me know that you liked it so far, and hit the subscribe button to stay up to date whenever part 2 drops. Thanks again for watching to the very end, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye!